This week, we welcome Jeff Rich, Executive Director at IdentityDefined Security Alliance, to discuss why identity is the perimeter. In the leadership and communication section, the importance of CISOs is not recognized by senior leadership, the secret habits of top-performing CISOs, get free copies of 2 of our favorite leadership books, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly.
If your organization is ready to embrace edge computing, we have good news. The 2023 AT&T Cybersecurity Insights Report provides everything you need to know to get started. In the report, we identify the common characteristics of edge computing. We found edge use cases are rapidly coming online, and we reveal how to secure edge computing, which is a dynamic, nonlinear, and unconventional approach to computing. Most importantly, you'll learn how to prepare for your edge ecosystem. Get your complimentary copy of the report today by visiting securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity. That's securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity. According to the 2022 Data Breach Investigations Report, the human remains the #1 driver of breaches today, demonstrating that cybersecurity is no longer just a technical challenge, but a human one as well. But how do you manage the human risks of cybersecurity? It starts with measurement. Only by effectively quantifying human risks can organizations engage employees with relevant activities to truly change human behavior. That's human risk management. Map key human behaviors to the business risks that matter most to your organization for free by visiting securityweekly.com/living security. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 319, recorded September 11th, 2023. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me for this session today are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque. It's football season, buddy.
It is football season. You know, it's been humid and rainy here in the Northeast in Rhode Island, but it was good to be able to spend a weekend watching football. It's that time of year again. I absolutely love it. Craziness happening all weekend. You know, I mean, we had the Lions beat the Chiefs. Browns pulled it out against the Bengals. You know, but at the end of the day, your Broncos still lost and my Patriots still lost. So I don't know. I have some hope for the Pats, though. We came really, really close against Philly.
Yeah, it's interesting. Both of the Super Bowl teams kind of struggled a little bit in week one. Yeah, they were both pretty vulnerable. And Cincinnati just, oh my God, the Browns just shut Burrow down. Like, holy cow.
Yeah, and then we're talking about in the pre-show banter a little bit about Texas putting a whooping on Bama.
Oh yeah. Horns down, nothing. They rolled the tide.
Yeah, they did. But this is the making for a good football season. I love it.
It is. Also joining from Austin, Texas, is my other co-host, Mr. Ben Carr.
Hey, Matt, how's it going today? Great to be with you guys again on this fine Monday where it's finally dropped below 100 as we were discussing before we got on. So, yeah, looking forward to potentially a little rain, too. I think it's 99 and 99.5, but yeah, it's getting there. It's getting there.
It's a little cooler up north here. Just a little bit. I think we're only going to get up to like 96 today or something like that. So we're a little cooler up here in the Fort Worth area. Yeah. Oh, goodness. Security Weekly listeners, SC Media's Endpoint Security Summit is just a few weeks away. Register now for this free 2-day virtual event, September 12th through the 13th at 10:45 a.m. Gain cybersecurity knowledge and professional development all in one place. Join keynotes and sessions led by industry top leaders, plus receive 6.5 CPE credits just for attending. Register today by visiting securityweekly.com/endpoint security. Jeff Rich serves as executive director of the IDSA, an active participant in the security community for 5 decades. Jeff is a well-known advocate for cybersecurity awareness and education. Previously, he served as VP of Member Success at Cloud Security Alliance, where he increased the capability of delivering and supporting benefits to members by 44%. The ISSA honored Jeff as the Distinguished Fellow and inducted him into the ISSA Hall of Fame in October 2015. Jeff, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Matt, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
So before we get into the topic, which is one of my favorite topics, I'm an app user data guy. Everybody knows that by now because I've said it like a bajillion times. We're going to talk about the identity piece of that here in a second. But give us a background on IDSA and who IDSA is for the audience.
Sure. IDSA, which is easier to say than the Identity-Defined Security Alliance, but they're both the same, been around for about 5 years. It was formed by a handful of identity and security vendors that has since expanded. The founding executive director, Julie Smith, brought it to a great place. And earlier this year, she retired. I was brought in, which I'm very happy and grateful for. And we have memberships that include identity vendors, identity partners like a consulting firm, and corporate members that, all of the users, and some people say victims of identities. And we also have some contributing members as well. All combined, we have benefits that drive to a lot of them that either help their education, we offer webinars, we have blogs, we have our annual conference, Identity Management Day, the second Tuesday of April every year. Looking forward to that again. In fact, we're just now starting planning for it for next year. So there's a lot going on, and I'm really excited to be here.
That's awesome. I love the identity space in that I think there's 3 controls that transcend whatever happens in cybersecurity. Doesn't matter whether you run on-prem or in the cloud or hybrid or whatever. You need to control your applications, your users, and your data, right? And it's this triad that I think is so important and we don't spend enough time on. And we're going to talk about this concept of identity is the perimeter. I think identity is a big portion of the perimeter. I think applications still play a little bit of a role here, but it is user access to these applications and data areas. And so when you think about some of the challenges with identity, I think about just the expansive nature of all the different identity solutions. We have a lot of capabilities out there. We're starting to see some consolidation, some consolidation, Jeff, in this space. But I think identity is a very complex issue still, isn't it?
Actually, I think it's more complex than it's ever been, because in the past, it was easy to say, I'm Jeff, this is me, maybe I have an ID badge, and maybe I have a password to get into the system I need to access. Now, take a look at all the different ways you can identify yourself, all the different places that's going to be used, how it's used, and most importantly, this creates what I'm calling, and I didn't coin the phrase, but I wish I had, identity sprawl, because it gets out there everywhere. And the biggest problem with that is not managing it, it's dealing with it when it needs to end. So we can talk about that, but the whole identity as a perimeter, if I may, I've been doing this a long time. I worked when there was just mainframe computers sitting in a room, and the perimeter were the 4 walls of the data center. And then there was networking, and network became the new perimeter. And then there was before the internet, there was client server, which became the new perimeter. And then the internet became the new perimeter. And the reason I think that identity is a perimeter now is, especially if you look at how people want to do zero trust, you can't get past any of those controls until you know who you're dealing with.
And Jeff, quick question for you. I mean, having a consortium that has members that are corporate leaders, partners, vendors, consultants, manufacturers, has the community really come together and figured out what that definition of identity truly is? Because if we think about it now, you have user identity. You can have device identity. You can have maybe what we can call synthetic or artificial identities these days, right? I mean, it's just getting more complicated. Has this consortium been able to bring together all of the professionals and leaders in this industry and truly define what identity means?
Well, we're striving to achieve that. I think the short answer is not yet. I'm not going to say no, but I'm going to say not yet. And you bring up a topic that's kind of close to my heart, in that we all start with our carbon-based identity, as I call it. It's you are, and I like to think that's pretty consistent for your entire life. You have silicon-based identities, some of which may be in your phone, in your tablet, in your car, in a device that you use a webcam, anything that's going to be touching the internet has silicon-based identities. And then we have what I call the artificial identities that link the two together. So I have my carbon base. I can create an artificial identity that's used to log into a system, and then I use that to authenticate myself to get to my webcam. I can use my phone to start my car. That's an identity. So to say, have we defined that? No. I think it's the easy definition is who, but what we haven't figured out yet is what and where.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know that we're on a good path, because in so many instances, you have conversations and you're negotiating what the true meaning of identity is and where that line in the sand is, right? So it's good to know industries coming together and having that tough conversation.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's a progress we need to make. And it goes back to if you looked at a military base 100 years ago, if you walked up to the gate, you would be challenged with the phrase, "Who goes there?" Mm-hmm. It's grown since then, so it is more complex.
Jeff, I spent time in the Marine Corps, and that was the question of every fire watch.
Mm-hmm. So see, that hasn't changed, but there's a lot more to it now.
Yeah, right. Jeff, you teased a question that I'm intrigued by, and I've had this kind of concern for a long time, and I think it's gotten worse. The big question is what happens when you need to terminate that identity, right? Especially as we look for stronger identity, then it becomes potentially harder to terminate. So I'm interested. You teased a little bit there. I'm interested if you have some more thoughts on that and that problem set.
I do. The identity sprawl really is kind of what causes what you're talking about there. And this is becoming more and more evident that I'm seeing with enterprises in particular. They don't create identity software, they don't offer it, but they have to use it. And they have three different perspectives to look at. They have their internal employee identities to manage. They have their partners and vendors and everyone else at that level to manage. And in many cases, they're going to have consumers or customers' identities to manage. So blend all that together. And when do you know right now when it's time to terminate someone's identity and or access within your ecosystem? Are they a customer? And if they're based in the EU as an example, and they requested to not be remembered, to forget their identity, is that the termination? Technically, it isn't. All you have to do is erase all the records and keep one that says, I've erased all the rest of the records. But that's very close to it. When an employee leaves your company, and I know this for a fact, that many companies are still dealing with, I turn off an account or I reset the password, and I wait to see what happens. And then they find out, oh, this person subscribed to this, or they have access to that, and I'm seeing messages come in for it that they have to deal with.
Yeah, we see that typically as a CISO, right? Like there are identities that persist in corporations for much longer than they ever should, right? And the question is, when do you terminate that identity? How do you have an assurance that you won't need that identity? And then, how do you make that association for the identity? It's not an easy problem to solve, and as I mentioned, I think it's getting much worse.
It is getting more complex. It is getting worse for some. We do an annual research survey, and I'm not going to either advertise that or try to get into details, but there's one thing I want to be able to bring up. And we had a question both last year and this year when we did the survey. And what factors are driving the increase in the number of identities at your company? This year, what was lower but higher this year is remote work. But on top still, but edging out remote work a bit, is adoption of more cloud applications and additional mobile devices. Blend those three together, and you have the problem you just described. And it is a challenge. And I would offer anyone looking for a software solution to say, here's a magic solution I can buy and implement, and that problem goes away. All you're going to be doing two things: spending money and making your problem deteriorate faster. You won't, and I'm not picking on any vendors, but there is not yet a magic solution that says, here's how you manage all that, because we don't really know what's out there, and we don't know what it is we're trying to manage. And until we identify that, if you pardon the pun, we won't be able to manage it no matter what tools are out there for us.
Are we seeing any progress in frameworks that are helping with identity management? I mean, a lot of conversation over the last couple of years has been zero trust, right? And really having that conversation of, number one, who are you? Prove you are who you say you are. And then what do you have access to in my environment, my systems, my data? Is that helping move things forward, or has it become a little bit more of a complexity thrown in there that's making it more difficult?
Well, I personally believe that zero trust in particular has helped, because if you take a look at a zero trust process, which could involve a framework, if you render it down, it boils down to every time you want to do something, you have to identify who you are and authenticate that it's you, and that you have the right to access to do what you're about to do. And you have to do that with every single transaction, which is why, by the way, a lot of zero trust implementations fail, because people think they need to do that everywhere, and the majority of what you have doesn't merit that, doesn't have that high a value. But when you use zero trust appropriately, you are reinforcing, I have to know who you are every time you do something. Every step you take requires me to identify you again. And I think that is actually helping for the organizations that get zero trust and put it in within the right guardrails in their environment. And because of that, they can take those principles that say, here's how I identify and authenticate people, and start putting them in their less valuable parts of the ecosystem, but still have the level of trust they want.
But doesn't that create a little bit of friction with the business, this re-authentication every single time, right? The discussion has always been a balance between security and productivity. And if I force you to re-authenticate or revalidate yourself, does that create too much friction for the business to actually adopt some of these principles, Jeff?
So, to be a contrarian, I don't believe they have to choose between security and productivity. Good security drives good productivity, in my opinion. And that could be another discussion. But to answer your question in particular, the friction can be caused if you give the impression that every time you're going to do something, you're back to square one for yourself and you need to redo everything again. Two guardrails that are going to help you get there without the perception of friction there. First, don't do zero trust everywhere. Do zero trust where on the family jewels, on really what makes sense for the high value elements of your organization. And no matter who you are, the majority of what you do is not high value. A lot of it's supportive and ancillary. So focus on the high value, first of all, and you're going to demonstrate, hey, we're taking extra steps because this is a high value stuff. And by the way, since this is all real high value, half of you that think you should be getting in there in reality shouldn't. So now we're taking that friction point that you're talking about and getting it down to a core that we can manage better. Then you could find tools from vendors that say we help with zero trust to make that a better interface for the user. You're still going to have to re-authenticate. You're going to have to find a way to do it. You don't hold it in memory. It doesn't work that way. But you're demonstrating the value. You're reducing the number of people that really need to get there and to the number of components that need to be protected. And that's, to my opinion, the first time you buy a tool that's associated with zero trust. Let's make that authentication a little less friction associated with that. And I think that's how you deal with it. It has to be high value or it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, in my day job is managing a product for human risk management. I mean, obviously, identity and the identity inputs is a big part of what we look at in our risk model, because there is so much fraud and attacks around the identity to use those identities to get in. And the question becomes, can you leverage a risk management approach to auth and access, which I think we can. I just don't think we're there as an industry yet, Jeff. But I think we could get there if we know where our risky users are, risky behaviors are, where there's high profile assets. Can we adaptively adjust the authentication requirements? It sounds like we're making some progress there. I'm just not sure we're there as a whole yet.
You're right. We're making some progress. Now, I teach some classes, some of which focus on getting ready for some security certifications. And as I said before, I've been doing this, let's just say, over 45 years. All right? I'm going with that. And a basic principle has never changed, and that's at level 0 in the kernel. That's highest security. What are you letting in there, if anything? And as you go out each level in concentric circles, you're going to have different types of access. As an example, I want to, and I encourage anyone with access to the internet to reach the IDSA website. It's idsalliance.org. I thought I'd throw that in. I want anyone to be able to do that. I don't want anyone to get into managing the website. I certainly want even fewer people to get into managing the data that's going to be presented there. So I look at those concentric circles to say I'm getting to the more valuable stuff. More controls on fewer things, fewer people get into it. So I think, Matt, to your point of how do we find a way to do that at different levels, I've also done some consulting in the past. I've started the security and risk programs at a few companies. I've done some consulting. Every time I go in for a consulting gig, and I'm not doing that right now, my first question is, when did it happen? And of course, most people want to say, what? Well, the reason that you hired a consultant, there was an impetus you had somewhere that said, we need to bring a security person in because of this problem. So let's talk about what that is. My second question is, and I know what the answer is going to be, but I have to ask it anyways. So can you give me a list of all of the assets that the company has and the appropriate relative value of each? Of course, if they could do that, they wouldn't need a security expert, because doing that gives you most of what you need if you have common sense to say, I need to protect the stuff at the top and less so at the bottom. So it doesn't matter what tools you have or what process you have. If you don't know what you have, you're not going to know what to protect. And if you don't know who's out there and who's your audience, you don't know how to authenticate them properly.
Back to the asset management problem, gentlemen, as we always talk about. Can't protect what you don't know you have.
It's the say easy, do hard.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So Jeff, how are organizations progressing? Right? Where are we today? I mean, I know I see stats that organizations maybe half have implemented MFA. In really truly putting focus on identity. How are organizations faring when it comes to maturing and really putting the investment into managing identities? The best practice today based on the complexities that we're dealing with.
Not as well as we should be. So I'm going to go back to some survey data before, and I'm not going to quote any numbers, but we asked 2 questions in the survey, and this is what was interesting. How well do you feel you have control over the identity sprawl and managing identities in your organization, and the consequences of what may come from that? And an overwhelming majority said, I'm in good shape. I like where I am. It's good. And then when we ask, have you suffered a breach, an identity-related breach in the past year? And even more people said yes. So I'm trying to correlate. People think they're in really good shape, and even more than that number of people say, yeah, they've had a problem in the past year. Which one is it? When you really think you're in good shape, you're going to be able to say, yeah, I've gone a year without a breach. And I know that may seem difficult right now, but it is doable. So there is progress being made. I talk to organizations that say, I have MFA installed, and I say, oh, what are you using? And they say, well, we text back a number. Okay, it's more than one. I'll give you that. However, that's not maybe the best step you should go for MFA. Other organizations are using more and more federated identity to say we're going to authorize app to app, to get back to Matt's core principle there. And you authenticate yourself once, and we'll use that to get you into something else. That could be a good way to help get there. Others are focusing on using a token or a key, like a USB key. I won't get into any brand names. I have to plug it in before I can get in to do something. Or others are saying, I'm going with passwordless. And it's kind of, to me, any passwordless company is going to be offended for me saying this. It's almost like federated on steroids, where, I find a way to authenticate myself first. I don't need a password, and then I can get to other things, and I don't need a password. That's ultimately, in my opinion, going to get us where we need to be, because now you're taking the weakest part of the human equation out, where you have to remember something or find a way to write it down or put it in a password manager, which brings its own set of risks as well, in order to get to something, versus let me find a way to authenticate you maybe with a key, and then I never have to ask you a password for that session, or forever maybe, for access to that. So I think the right progress is being made. I'm concerned that there are CISOs. Let's talk about CISOs. The smart CISOs know what they need to do, get their program in place, and then buy the tools to do that. The CISOs that sometimes maybe they're relatively new, or they're in an immature organization, get a budget, go out and buy tools, and then have to figure out, what do I do to make this work? And their successor ends up coming up with the right process, trashing half the tools, and then putting the right ones in place. So as much as that may be a negative comment, I do think we are making progress in that area.
No, that's good. But there seems to be a false sense of security on how well we're doing. And this is a good lesson learned. Take a gut check. Really take a look at your organization and see if you are performing the way you need to. And to your point, don't just go out and buy shiny blinky lights thinking that it's going to solve the problem. You actually have to have a good program in place and then put the technology on top of it.
Absolutely.
Because we're finding in those instances that when you do go buy, these best of breed tools, if they don't have mature processes and frameworks around it, they're not adopting those tools to the capabilities that they could. So they're getting 20% adoption out of something they should be getting 80, 90% adoption out of.
Yeah, Jeff, I was watching our Discord channel, actually, and there was a really interesting string as you were talking about security keys, because people, there's some examples of actually using the security keys. They think it's a better approach than SMS-based MFA, for example, which we know has potential issues with it. And how, if implemented correctly, it could actually drop time from an authentication perspective. So it was interesting as you were describing it, we were getting comments about security keys in the chat at the same time. It's just, do you have the right processes to leverage those USB security keys as an alternative to one-time passwords or the SMS kind of multi-factor authentication?
Yeah, it's a new infrastructure for many, and I am looking at the comments as well. It's a new infrastructure or ecosystem really for many, but it's a good way to overlay it, because let's face it, there's a whole bunch of organizations that may never meet an employee in person ever. Now you talk about being in the Marines, Jason. Clearly vouching for someone and getting your CAC. That's an in-person thing, all right. But when you take, there's also a higher value asset we're talking about too. So let's not do a comparison. But when you come to an organization like this, there is no easy way to say, come to the office and let me give you your key. So do you buy one? Do you and ship it to them? Do you have them buy one and register it with you? So there's that whole ecosystem there, first of all. And then you have to ensure that, okay, it works great on my computer, but now I'm away from my desk and I need to authenticate myself on my phone, and that USB plug that I put into the computer won't go into my phone. Now what do I do? So it can be complex, but as Jason and I were saying, get the right program in place, really, and develop your processes, and do a pilot without any tools. See what it's like to go through it manually, and then find the tools to make it faster, better, and more scalable.
That's a great recommendation and a perfect way to end this segment, by the way. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I look forward to doing it again.
Awesome. We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.